Welcome to But What If We Win with me, Zuri Horwitz. I was an El Paso County candidate for U.S. Congress in Congressional District 5 in Colorado. And the reason I ran was because I wanted to make sure that we had an actual plan if we were in office, and that we make sure that we have actual candidates that care enough about our country to enact policies that will make our lives better, because our country is failing and we have people in control who are venal, destructive, and pathetic, and one note, and we're stuck having to think about them. And so many of those are billionaires. Eventually this will get to AI and big tech, but in the meantime, let's talk about these awful, awful human beings. I'm going to tell a little parable from a Jewish parable. It's not, it's apocryphal. It's just kind of made up as far as I can tell. And it basically talks about a man who used to be extremely generous with his neighbors. And because he was so kind and so generous and so wonderful in his community, God blessed him with great wealth. And then, once he had all this wealth, he stopped helping his neighbors. So God had a holy man visit him. And that holy man had him look out the window. And he said, "What do you see?" And he said, "I see my neighbors." And then he had him look in the mirror. And he said, "What do you see?" And he said, "I see myself." And that silver divided him from the people around him. And those are billionaires times, a billion. Being a billionaire is publicly showing the world that you are a one-note human being, that you have devoted yourself to accumulating wealth and isolating yourself from other human beings. Every single interaction is asymmetrical. If somebody is starving, that is generally not a choice on their part. If they can't afford their rent, it's usually systemic. But when you become a billionaire, that is a choice. And that tells me that you really suck, that you are pathetic. If you need more than $10 million to move through the world, you will never be able to afford a therapist that can help you, because you are fucked in the head. Sorry. These are people that I never want to think about, that I do not enjoy. And yet we are forced to deal with them and the way that they have remade our world into the hollow image of themselves. These gross, gross people are stuck in the silver boxes of their own making, where they can only see themselves over and over and over again. And so, and having to be stuck with themselves, I could not think of a worse curse in the world than to be stuck with yourself if you were the kind of person that wants to become a billionaire. And then to be the type of person that is a billionaire. I can't think of something more disgusting than that. Sorry, you don't get there by accident, but you have literally encased yourself away from humanity when you are a billionaire. Every interaction that you have is not communal. You are constantly alone and in competition. You are the saddest, self-inflicted loser on earth. So let me talk about a story that really radicalized me. I had a friend, struggling entertainer, dancer, worked as a private Pilates instructor, and she worked one-on-one with billionaires. And you know who didn't pay her? The person that could barely pay her rent? Billionaires. And that to me perfectly encapsulates them. They are unable to see and understand the humanity of other people, because every interaction, every little flick of these boring, insipid people could ruin somebody's life. So everything that they interact with has no depth. And you don't spend all of your time becoming this because you're a complex human being. And I'll talk about a few examples. But let's just look at the world that they have created. How do I know these are deeply boring, one-dimensional people? Look at the wonderful world they've created. The world they've created that destroys higher learning when the US used to be a destination for the intelligentsia of the world. Look at the way that they have destroyed US aid and killed at least hundreds of thousands of people. Look at the dumb wars they start. Look at the way that they've destroyed journalism, the EPA, our national forests, the Voting Rights Act. Look at the monoculture that they have created. It is a culture created by people who do not understand art or science or creativity, who, and instead of creating community, destroy with an algorithm. FD Signifier and Deja Sade, and I'm probably saying their names wrong, talked about this, how in the 90s and before we had TikTok and social media, which could disrupt communities, people would have garage bands and they'd have ska, they'd have punk, they'd have emo, they'd have rap. And it was based on the people that you were in proximity to. It was based on conversations, and it wasn't disrupted because an algorithm had picked one of your videos. And now it decided to pass you up because it felt like going to a different video or a different time, where you're constantly, there's a movie, and I'm not remembering the movie, but basically it would interchange memories between people so that they were all mixed up. And that when you have all that constantly shifting of the sand beneath your feet with the way that they do algorithms, there's no building on top of it. There's no culture, there's no style, there's micro trends, but there isn't, and they can be very, very ornate, but they don't have any point of reference. They don't live in the world. The only thing this tiny village of venal idiots, because there's 10,000 billionaires, cares about is making money. It's market share. They are stuck in a time loop in the 80s. Another thing that spurred me to this was billionaire Nick Hanauer, who has a podcast called Pitchfork Economics, which sounds really good. But then he revealed his ass in an episode. He said, so I know Jeff Bezos is an extremely galactically talented person, is the most extremely galactically talented person I've ever met. And I have met a lot of people, right? And there is almost no scenario in which Jeff Bezos would not have come out on top. How much should the system provide for the most capable and hardworking person in society? That's fucking bullshit. All I can say is that is utter, disgusting BS. You know how he came out on top? His parents invested about $245,573 into Amazon in 1995. I can guarantee there are almost no people on earth whose parents can give them that kind of money. In today's dollars, that's over $3 million. Unsurprisingly, given how one note he is as a human being, his stepdad was an Exxon engineer. Shocked Pikachu face. Nick does a cute little podcast, and sometimes, and this is a little bit from Sideburns. So this idea, but it's sometimes a billionaire accidentally flicks a little sweat and it looks like moisture for us. So it's a podcast. You have some great interviews, but he's not really in it because he still thinks somebody like Jeff Bezos is the most extremely hardworking man out there. Yeah, if the only people you're around are billionaires, he looks hardworking. And if the only people you acknowledge as human beings are billionaires, he looks hardworking. Have you ever friggin' met a busboy? Have you ever met a construction worker? Have you ever met somebody working 16 to 18 hours a day so hard that they eventually get a stroke and they say, it's so nice to have a stroke because I can finally have a vacation? Huh, Nick? Have you? I can guarantee you this man, and I want to talk a little bit about Bezos and his skill. Look at this embarrassment of a person. Jeff Bezos, married to a Temu trophy wife. Just second rate. He has spent his entire life extracting as much money for himself at every level of the supply chain. He has spent his life's work. If he's so capable and hardworking, then why is the result of him and his hard work such trash? Why has he resulted in the enshittification of every object that we own, of clothing, of washing machines, of gadgets and gizmos, making them break so that he can get more profit, pitting himself against small business owners so that their unique designs become fake reproductions from Amazon? Because this isn't a man that understands art or creation. This isn't a man that understands humanity. This isn't a man that understands or respects craftsmanship. He is consumed by unending greed and the laughable idea that he can buy culture, like attempting to buy Venice or buy the Met Gala. This man contributes nothing and takes everything. And what he takes becomes dross in his hands once he touches it, because he has no concept of art and beauty. Because he thinks that they are things that can be bought, when there are conversations to be had with other human beings. And the only people that he has conversations with are other similarly one-note individuals. It's like when comedians like Dave Chappelle lose their ability to be funny because they got super rich, because they've lost their perspective, because they've lost an understanding of what the vast majority of people are experiencing. They don't have real problems. I mean, they have real problems. Those problems are just really pathetic and sad and like of their own making. And, I talked a little bit about the same thing happening over at TikTok with Ellison buying it. Propping up Israel, which is, genocidal. Like I do not believe in regime change. I do not believe it's our choice for how people rule themselves. We don't have to put our money in there. But when they don't like something, they just remove a video or a creator from being seen by other people. They act like little puppet masters, but they're puppet masters without any vision, because the only thing they know how to puppet is destruction. They don't care about camaraderie, expression. Thought melts away when it's around a billionaire. These are sad, small men in silver boxes who have made a destructive, pathetic world. As awful as Neil Gaiman is, he understood destruction in the Sandman series, which fully understands these tiny little men. Destruction could blow everything up, but he couldn't draw a sunset. So what does this have to do with AI and big tech? These one-dimensional, boring nothing people run our lives and want to control our lives. They can't hear us, they can't see us, they have no interest in understanding us. But they need to run away from themselves, because any time with themselves is horrifically boring, mind-numbing. If they really had to be alone with themselves for a minute, they would kill themselves, because they have nothing to live for, because they contribute nothing to the world. So they make everything about us while caring not a whit about us. Look at the AI commercials. Look at the Liberty Mutual commercials. They're supposed to be selling us something. But every character who is supposed to be an everyman is portrayed as a stupid idiot and spoken about in a condescending tone by the narrator. Look at AI ads that tout never interacting with people for CEOs and never having to care about their workers again. And look at what they think we want, which is another boss to schedule them and tell them what to do. I was a commercial actress for a few years, and the commercials that I was in that were successful, which weren't that many, at the time tried to actually appeal to real human beings. We played a young couple with a washing machine going crazy and moving around. The director made sure that we had repartee and chemistry, and that, there was joy and feeling. You know, I wore, in both of the commercials, I wore the clothes that I wear, that I owned, because it was of the moment. I was in a McDonald's commercial and we looked like artsy potheads, and we ended up, you know, at least one of the other girls in the commercial I ended up being friends with for a really long time, because again, there was like community and understanding, and we were there for that reason. And even if it was just a snapshot, it was a feeling. And even if it was just selling stuff, they at least cared enough to try to sell a feeling, to try to understand why somebody would want something. And we no longer even have that in our commercials. And so these billionaires are why big tech, why social media, why AI is terrible. Because the people overseeing AI and big tech are terrible. They are a bunch of no-faces from Spirited Away. You're just going to have to look it up. I'm going to keep bringing it up, but it's really important. They are not people you would ever choose to be around or interact with. But you must consider, because they can't just be losers alone in their little boxes. They use AI and big tech to make the world as facile and stupid as they are, as cruel and destructive as they are. So what do we need, and what do they need to stop being losers on such a grand scale? Like No Face, who was a spirit who pretended to have money and was a huge glutton and took and overran the bathhouse, until Sen gave them some structure and said, no, and I don't care. They need rules. They need consequences. And we need our privacy and the rights to our data. We need AI to only be used as a tool, not a replacement for jobs. Right now, AI is being used as a cudgel instead of overseeing and being used like a tool, like a calculator. So what does that mean? Our privacy, we need to own our data. We need agency over ourselves online and in the world. We need AI, can be fine, but what's happening is that it's being overseen by a few billionaires who do not care about humanity. Instead of being used as a tool and double-checked and still having the investment of real research and, you know, fact-checked and, you know, like, okay, we're going to use it for this thing. Now, is it accurate? Have we checked with human beings that it's accurate? And are we paying those human beings? Yes. You know, I used AI in this when I looked up the Nick Hauer quote, or whatever his fucking name is, who cares? Because which was useful. I could say, hey, I heard it in the podcast. They had a transcript from it. I searched the transcript and I found it. You know, who knows if that quote was perfectly, I didn't check it perfectly. You know, if this was a little better edited, I would. But I think it's really important to understand it can be used in a tool, in a spotted way. It can get rid of ums and ums in editing. But what they're using it for, just like Uber did, just like Facebook did, is to get rid of people. It's an excuse to destroy people. And it doesn't need to be used in every situation. And it doesn't need to be in Colorado Springs, where we already have drought conditions. These people need to pay their taxes. And if Nick wants to actually be a person of significance, of weight, get the fuck rid of your money. There are so many causes that actually need help. You fucking loser. Again, these are people that are disgusting people. You don't become this kind of person. And you can't become this kind of person. You can't devote this much time maintaining and having this much money and living in isolation from other human beings and be okay. If any former billionaire wants to come on this podcast, if you ever want to get on this podcast, you better be worth $10 million. I'm not talking to you, you disgusting fuck. Sometimes there is just, I'm sorry, I just think it's so sad to be that destructive and have no interest in humanity. And I hate that we have to think about them so much, because they have such small, one-note people have so much impact on billions of people's lives. Anyway, in the next episode, we will try to get into AI big tech laws in Australia, the European Union, and the United States. We will look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. One of the things that's really difficult is that many laws start out well, but get turned into trash by the billionaires, which is a fitting metaphor for everything that they touch. Instead of everything they touch turning into gold, everything that they touch turns into dross. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for being awesome and for choosing to be at least a much better human being than they are. All right. Bye-bye.